has said that the SAS has lost a third of its strength through its attritional fighting over 10 years in Afghanistan and also Iraq. There is no doubt in the BBC's view that the SAS are being covertly used in Libya as forward observers for the airstrike campaign there. But the question comes about, where is this attrition coming from? It's not coming directly from casualties, because the casualty list for the SAS is not as significant as the BBC would have us believe. There has not been a widespread massacre of SAS soldiers, after all, by Al Qaeda. And the SAS did not suffer in the same way that the CIA suffered when it had 7 of its agents killed in a clandestine and extremely complicated plot by Al Qaeda to kill CIA operatives. The SAS has been far more professional than the CIA and has not exposed itself to this kind of operation by Al Qaeda. But what is certain is that the attraction of private armed companies is one of the reasons why the SAS is losing manpower. Originally, the mercenary forces, though they have existed throughout the history to the beginning of military conflict, certainly have been used by the British government before. The privateers, the buccaneers of Morgan, who eventually became governor of Jamaica after removing the Spanish from those territories, and may or may not have some familiar link to J.P. Morgan of the financial empire and gangster crime family. So you can see how the mercenary business from its beginnings has been a very murky one. In more recent times, the Sandline affair with Tim Spicer, where the Sandline were used by certain criminal enterprises within the British establishment to try and take over or against the British establishment, but a powerful crime family that's quite high up used them to try and take over a small African country rich in oil and diamonds. The Blood Diamonds film was alluding to this, and they were left by the Thatcher family to rot in an African prison in Zimbabwe. Tim Spicer, that was. Now, these guys were all ex-SAS people. So what are they doing rotting in an African prison, and why aren't they being helped by the British government? Because they weren't there on the auspices of the British government. The British government didn't ask them to work for a feudalistic crime family based in the West. It's armed forces of the British Crown are there to protect the people of Britain. They are there as an armed, uniformed public service, and that is the point of this video. Can we really adapt the SAS to the modern world when we're not fighting always people armed with guns and explosives, but people who have a fanatical will to cause harm through maybe the use of computers or simply through the use of knives, poison and boxing? Most of the people killed by Al Qaeda have been killed in clandestine operations in the Arabic world and also in the West through such use of basic weapons and as knives. Basically, most people have been killed in that manner, not through the use of explosives, which catches the world's view and the media's view. What is going on behind the scenes of the use of explosives and guns on a wide scale? And I'm not saying that Al Qaeda don't use them. Of course they do use them, and they use planes as well. They will use, after all, their methodology was to use a corridor of fear tactic on 9/11, and also simply to use box cutters, which are knives basically, to take over planes and hit them into the World Trade Center. Could the SAS have stopped this? Well, the SAS are certainly trained in hand-to-hand combat, but their main role, of course, is to use arms and technology to neutralise people and their training and their hard physical conditioning that's going through many, many miles of marching. Should the SAS, though, be privatised? Should they be allowed to work for private military companies? If we want to maintain their special forces that is the envy of the world and the terror of Al Qaeda, then certainly we should perhaps think about barring the SAS from private military companies. Although, can you do this under the law? Can you stop somebody fulfilling their basic right to choose when their labour is used and how and where? Well, in the case of the SAS, perhaps we might want to put some barriers in their way, because the regiment, apparently, from what the BBC said, and I do not know anyone in the SAS, I'm just going on what the BBC said, is losing men to these private military companies like Blackwater, Sandline and others. Also, the dangerous combination of such companies as Exxon, Halliburton and Blackwater were all three of those companies were arguing for the Iraq War, which got us into a quagmire that has lasted nearly 10 years, since 2003. It will probably be more than 2 years before the last American soldiers leave. So that's the 10-year quota there. Should the SAS be expanded? In my view, it should. During the Second World War, it had nearly 6,000 members. Thousands of people today, as the BBC said, are applying for the SAS, but not all of them are physically or mentally capable, because they're veterans and they've been exposed to warfare where they've lost limbs or damaged in some other way, or they've got mental scars from actually fighting. There's also the problem that many people who want to get into the SAS want to do so because they want to experience warfare. It is the part of their role and their job, obviously, but they've already attained that by being in the parachute regiment or the Royal Marines in Afghanistan, and they've already done things which they were trained not to do, and yet have done them and said, we've done that and it actually does work. So everything in war is being reassessed all the time. As I said in my British Army videos, which you may have watched before this one, the ethos of the British Army is obviously professionalism, stoicism and good conditioning. Can the entire public service that is the armed forces be maintained when you've got cuts? Well, the SAS has been ring-fenced away from the cuts and has not been so severely affected. But when the regiment is getting down to the numbers of hundreds rather than thousands, and we're up against a criminal crime family, feudalistic crime family in the Saudis and Bin Laden crime families, with hundreds of thousands of people and billions of dollars of oil and banking and construction money, perhaps we need a much larger and even tougher special forces community. Increasingly, the whole level of professionalism of the British Army, as Andy McNabb said, is getting better. The British Army is the best it's ever been, according to him. And on that basis, I must conclude this talk, because he is the professional who's best known and most well quoted. But with the attraction of private military companies, we must increase the pay and conditions of the SAS, and I believe that's the course to take forward in this matter. Thank you for listening. See you in part 2.